Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So, Vasishta, I think we can get started and indicate that we can get started. I'd like to welcome all of you to our first industry tech talk of this semester. We are very fortunate to have Entelect kick off the series. Uh, Today, we are going to have Deashen Reddy speaking to us, who's a senior QA engineer at Entelect. He's been there for almost 4 years, broad background, doing a lot of interesting things before he got to Entelect. He's based in the Durban offices, and he's going to be telling us about his journeys in bug hunting, which can be frustrating yet also very rewarding. So I'd like to immediately hand over to Diashin, and we're really looking forward to listening to what you have to say.
Cool. Um, oh, I was sharing before, but now it says I'm unable to share.
So Basically, maybe the okay, you are co-host again. Just check
Okay, there
now.
we go. Now we go. Sweet.
Excellent.
Alrighty. All right. So welcome everybody. So yeah, my name again is Deashen Reddy. A lot of people in Intellect call me Deesh. Uh, yeah. Um, Join me in our quest for quality, right? Today, we're just going to cover a couple things of what the industry really looks like, current roles that you might be aware of, and what they may entail. We'll also cover a few areas relating to quality and what it might mean in the industry and what skills you may need to succeed in this role. But first, who am I? Again, Deashen Reddy, Senior Quality Engineer at Intellect. So I am a consultant and I specialize in automation and performance testing. I'm also a coffee enthusiast. So yeah, coming out of university, I was pursuing down the road of programming, being a developer. But I had a passion to make a difference, and it kind of led me down the quality route. And when I was presented with an opportunity to go into an automation engineering role, it was kind of, what is this about? Not sure exactly what it was about. So it did take me down that path. We'll get into more detail a little bit later on. In terms of the different roles, at Intellect, we call these guys avatars. So each of these avatars represents a specific role. So the most common one that everyone's aware of is the developer. At Intellect, we call them a commando or a technologist or a commodore, just based on the kind of level of seniority you have. Coming in, you might be a commando as a software development engineer. Moving into technologist, where you become more of a senior or in a leadership role, kind of in the specialist development space. You actually then move on to becoming a sage, which is the kind of a solutions architect at that stage, which is something we all aim to be at one stage or another. Obviously, there's specific development roles as back end, front end, and full stack. Yeah, won't need to go too much into detail about that. There's also the analyst roles, which we call agents, focusing on systems or business analysts. We also have a scout, which is a data engineer role, um, works with raw data to kind of process that and allows businesses to make kind of useful decisions or meaningful decisions using new and cool tools like Power BI. We also have a Pathfinder role, which is a UX engineer. Obviously, they focus on kind of mocking and Figma style designs about how systems should look like. And then finally, we have the role which I am, which is Sentinel, which is the QA engineer. The avatar for the QA is a Sentinel, and this has been my chosen path. But what is it that I actually do? So one of the things that I like to kind of express out is that quality is a team responsibility, right? But as a quality engineer in a team, you are the main driver of that quality. The team would look for you or look to you to define what quality looks like in the team itself, right? As a quality engineer, you need to understand things like the business requirements, take that, figure out what it is you're trying to achieve, and then figure out ways on how to validate if this thing is doing what it's supposed to do, right? This can be kind of defined in a variety of different ways, and you have to kind of figure out, okay, what tools and techniques do I use to get this thing tested in a way that we can assure that it is working as expected. It's kind of a mix of technical, but also on focuses on communication on the analyst side because you're the bridge a lot of the time between the business analysts, and the developers themselves. You need to understand from the technical point of view, from the implementation side, as well as from the business side, ensuring everybody is aligned on what needs to be done. Uh, Quality goes further than just um, the system itself, right? I like to divide it into two major sections, which is project and product quality, right? We need to make sure that on the project side, we need to understand the right level of detail is there on the project process side of things, right? We need to make sure that quality is there in every step of the way. We heard about definition of ready, definition of done. But what does that actually mean, right? If a BA comes up to you and says, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and then you do X, Y, and Z, what does X, Y, and Z mean? How does it fit in to this whole system? If I implement X, Y, and Z, what happens to A, B, and C? All of these questions are key questions you need to ask during that kind of refinement process. And things cannot come into the development space and the QA space unless these are fleshed out properly. These are quality processes that you can put into place as a quality engineer, and that's kind of a role that you would be taking on. The product side is making sure that you're doing the right thing and doing the thing right. Understand the difference between the two. There are myths that we're out to catch developers or just aim to expose them or even break things. It's very, very far from the truth. In my experience, we're all aiming for the same goal, right? A lot of the time, it's not the dev that makes the mistakes that we catch, right? It's a misalignment of a requirements or something weird in the way that this newly developed feature or enhancement is integrated into the current system, right? It may not always have been considered when you're implementing a new feature that something might be affected by it or some sort of bug might be regressed. It could even be the case that a bug was already in the system and your newly implemented feature now exposes this bug. It's not always about hunting developers. To go about QA and the functional process of it, we focus on understanding what needs to be validated, right? Defining a plan on how we're going to execute and make sure that it is um, kind of working as expected, and then manage all of these expectations and document all of these things in specific management tools, right? Now, within the QA space, we can divide this approach up into two major sections, right? So one is the functional side and the technical side, all right? On the technical side, we focus on automation and performance testing. This is more after the fact of doing functional testing. The functional side, we focus on making sure the system is working as expected, making sure that it aligns, whichever feature is being implemented aligns to what it is that the business actually requires, right? And depending on the system that's being implemented, we then adjust our approach based on that. So if it's a mobile app that you're developing, you'd require a different set of tools than if it's a front end or back end system that you're implementing, right? Automation performance testing is also technical testing, but it fits in to kind of support and enhance functional testing in the sense that functional test cases that get executed, you can then automate those same test cases and execute it without having the manual effort inside of it. And then you do get a handful of people who are capable or specialized in both these areas. In automation testing, we focus on or we break down the implementation into four kind of main automation styles, right? There are others out there, but these are the main four that you would get as an automation engineer in the kind of industry, right? Front end or UI based automation is focused specifically on replicating or impersonating a user interacting with a system, right? We simulate the user interactivity, kind of like a bot. We'd go into a system, we'd log in, we'd interact, we'd click, we'd grab the text assert that it's supposed to be what it's supposed to be. We'd interact, we'd make sure that it's navigating correctly, and then we get a set of results from that. On the API side, we can actually simulate calls as a system would. So we would kind of create a call. So like when you go to a website and you fill in a form, the form gets converted to like a JSON file or whatever. You can simulate that by sending it directly to that endpoint or directly to that web service and then validate the responses that you get back. This, in addition to it being technical, you can actually automate that process where you just click a single button and validate that all of your backend web services are working as expected. We can also implement mobile frameworks where we actually launch a simulator and launch the app on that simulator, and then use the same techniques to go in and actually pretend to be a user on that system, go through and navigate through the app and validate that it's working. All of these are simulating user actions. So they kind of sit outside or a level outside of a normal unit test. You're simulating a user, and the parts or the journey that you would take match the test cases that a functional QA engineer would create. As an automation or as a quality assurance engineer, you kind of have those two parts. You can start off as a quality assurance engineer where you kind of work specifically on breaking down requirements, creating test cases, making sure you have sufficient coverage, and then kind of moving on to ensuring quality across the project and product. Moving on to kind of more senior and leadership roles where you kind of work across different products, and then eventually to a manager where you're kind of working across a company or an organization where you're kind of defining quality standards at an organizational level. This can be in the functional and the technical side. The technical side, you're focusing more on the the automation side, automation strategies, kind of how does automation interact with this system, but also automation strategies across different organizations, and eventually at an architect to have standards across your organization. Again, as I mentioned before, you do have a couple of people that kind of can do all of this, and we call them full stack QAs. So, as an automation engineer, that's kind of where I started my journey. There are a couple of specific tools that you use. So a couple of major tools that we have to use is a test management tool, right? So for every test case, every path, every user journey, you kind of have to document it at some place. So there are special tools, special test management tools that will allow you to track all of these journeys, allow you to track kind of like a ticketing system in terms of what's been covered, what needs to be covered, and also track your results of execution, right? And these test management tools provide a lot of value, not just to the QAs or the QA team, but to the whole team to understand, okay, you have 50 tests, 45 are passing, 5 are failing. Why are the 5 failing? You can then investigate, figure out why these 5 tests are failing. It also shows visibility to the rest of the team in terms of how well your system's performing, how you call it health checks, how healthy is the system. And these are very popular tools that we would use to manage from a functional side. From an automation side, there's a bunch of different tools out there. Again, a lot of tools can accomplish the same goal. The way that you can describe or differentiate between these is that you have a language that you would use, so Java, C Sharp, Python, uh, Node with TypeScript or JavaScript, whichever approach you want to use, and then you would apply an automation kind of engine on top of that that would use, so the language would then use that engine to then execute those. The two main popular ones are the Selenium ones, or Selenium. It's kind of the Golf One of automation out there. And then you have newer tools like Playwright and Cypress, which are kind of like the Golf 8 GTIs, if you want to call it anything like that. So naturally, for me specifically, um, I like to go with the Golf 8 GTIs. These are really fast, so there's two solutions that I would prefer from my personal use. One is Playwright with .NET or C Sharp, and the other one is Playwright with Node.js, specifically with TypeScript. There is also other automation concepts that you will learn along the way, things like behavior-driven development and page object model. But yeah, before we get into too much of detail, show you a little bit of code. So this is an example of a test script. Just keep in mind that this was developed a couple of years ago. It's just a little demo that we have. Basically, this is an example of a test case, right? So a test case in this specific example will launch a browser, go to a URL, verify that you are in that URL, fill in a username, password, click login, and then verify the URL to make sure that you're on the landing page. All right. And this is an example of running this test. So this is actually launching a Chrome browser or specifically Chromium browser. You can see that it actually launches the website, logs in with specific users, verify that you're on the right page, and then close the browser. We can also do it for Firefox, which is pretty cool. So again, this is just a single click, and it's going to run those three tests against the different browsers. And WebKit, well, some people will know as Safari. This is actually launching an instance of the WebKit. So these Chromium or these web drivers are actually the drivers that power the different browsers that we know. So Chromium would be the main engine driver for Chrome, for Edge, a couple of others out there as well. Firefox is obviously Firefox, and WebKit is the one specifically used for Safari browsers on the iOS side. The other solution we have is the .NET solution. So in here we have a feature file. So this is an example of behavior-driven development where we define in simple English what we're trying to achieve. So the scenario is logging into a specific website. So we have an Intellect challenge. Intellect challenge is a challenge that we issue out to universities, to the industry, as well as internally as our company cup. It's just a little kind of like a hackathon, if you want to call it that, or a little challenge that we send out to go and register and build a solution. Each year, there's a different solution out there. In this scenario, we're just validating the system for Intellect Challenge. This is the a simple login scenario again using .NET. For every line that appears in that BDD script, we have code behind. So if you know ASP, those kind of old school way of code behind. It's kind of similar to that. So for every statement that's there, we have a specific code behind that does a specific goal, right? So in here, when we fill in a username, we take that username, we pass it into the specific block. I won't go into too much tech detail, but this is an example of the .NET solution. And what's really cool about this is that these tests, all right, they're actually running concurrently, which saves a lot of time. So these are actually two tests that would take two users a couple of minutes to test out, but this system is doing it in a couple of seconds concurrently. Again, this is a simple example, and a lot of this has been my career, and a lot of this has been done within Intellect. Before I continue, are there any questions of what we've covered so far, or what I covered so far?
At the moment, I don't see anything on the
All
chat,
right.
so I think you can carry on.
All right, cool. So that's just kind of a high level from the QA side of things. Just kind of give you a little bit more information about Intellect. So again, this company was founded as a software development company or software development consultancy firm, right? What separates us from other companies out there is the senior leadership team, the CEO, the CTO, uh, all of these kind of C-level managers have all been former developers before, right? They are that kind of software development mindset has been ingrained from the top levels down. So the guys that are asking us to do X, Y, and Z have done X, Y, and Z before. So that's very important to us, right? Founded in 2001, so we've been around the block for a while. We're rapidly growing. We've got, I think, 10 locations globally. We have in South Africa, we have our Cape Town, our Durban, and our Joburg office. We also have an office in Harare as a talent hub, similar to Durban. Globally, we have a location in Australia and New Zealand. We also have it in the Netherlands as well as the UK. And yeah, we're looking to grow even more. Another thing that separates us from other companies is that we have these three core values, right? Growth isn't optional. So when you come in and work for a company, regardless of what company you work for, every day you should be learning something different, something new, or improving your craft in some sort of way. It can be just general experience from your day to day, or it could be something like learning, getting a specific certification in whichever craft that you belong to. Um, and it could also be soft skills. It doesn't necessarily have to be a craft related skill, right? All right. Fellowship sets us apart. Another big one, all right? We believe that together we'll solve a lot of these problems. And collaboration is something that's ingrained in us at Intellect. We believe that um, we have a thing called a 45-minute rule. If you're stuck on a problem for more than 45 minutes, call somebody, reach out to somebody. Two minds are better than one. And this translates over not just to the team, but to the customer as well. The customer that we're trying to support, right? A lot of the times we see them as, clients or customers, but they're people. And that's how we approach all of our relationship and engagements. And then finally, as well, regardless of all of the other stuff, we just have to get things done, right? We have to deliver, we have to get our stuff done. Regardless of the craft that you work in, you know what you need to do. Intellect firmly believes that you know what you need to do. How do we make sure that you're able to do what you need to do? Cool. All right. For more information, you can find out about us at culture.intellect.co.za. You can find out more about any of the crafts mentioned as well. Um, but yeah, that's it from my side. Um, yeah, do you guys have any questions?
So participants, you're welcome to raise your hand and you can speak and we can answer your questions, or you're welcome to uh, place it in the chat. But for now, just to start, Deashen, can you tell us a little bit about the Durban office? Because that obviously us being based in Durban, a lot of students would be interested in a company that has a presence in Durban. So can you just tell us a little bit about what exists in Durban and how you'll work with the other teams and just anything that you feel will be relevant for the people, for our students?
Sure. So yeah, so the Durban office, it was actually a happenstance thing that happened during our lockdown process. So Durban is not really a place people look for in terms of companies out there. But what Intellect have noticed is that there's a lot of talent within Intellect there's a lot of talent within Durban, excuse me. And even though we may not necessarily have the big clients like the banks and the insurance and finance industry, although they may not necessarily have presence in Durban from a head office point of view, there is a lot of talent here. So Intellect has invested Durban as a talent hub. It's kind of different to the Joburg and Cape Town offices, where the Joburg and Cape Town offices are very much client facing. So we have clients that are interacting directly with Intellect at the Intellect offices or um, at the client offices. So One of the clients we have were F&B, so another one is a discovery. So I know a lot of our teams go into the discovery and F&B offices to work together as a team, but also to work with the client to solve whatever problem we're trying to solve, right? For us in Durban, it does mean that we are a little bit left out in terms of those day-to-day collaborations. However, we still, the remote culture is very much still there, right? We're still able to kind of, in this industry, in this day and age, it's very little that we can't accomplish from the Durban office. And every so often we do fly up to the different offices, the Joburg or the Cape Town, to actually spend some time with the clients or with the team together. So even though you're in Durban, you're not necessarily left out, if that makes any sense. In addition to that, there's also a little Durban community that we built here. We have our own little Durban culture, which is a slight variation of what we would expect in the other offices. However, it is has that little Durban spice and the Durban flavor there as well.
Thanks for that, Yash. And there are actually now quite a few questions that have come in.
Yeah.
Let's take it one step at a time. Firstly, can you just touch a little bit about recruitment opportunities? What is the current situation, and like, are they actively looking to recruit? What are the processes for our students if they are interested in applying to Entelect? And just tell us a little bit about prospective opportunities for our students.
Yes, of course. So, yes, Intellect is very much hiring. We're always on the hunt for talent. In our recruitment process, we don't hire specifically for like a specific client or a specific engagement, right? We don't hire based on demand, if that makes any sense. We hire based on talent, right? So if you have the talent, we'll hire you and then figure out where you'd fit in best, right? We're in a position now. We are like 1,600 employees, and we have a lot of presence of a lot of the big clients and big companies, right? So yes, we're constantly hiring. We're constantly looking for talent. What would be most appropriate for you guys is our Intellect Boot Camp or our graduate program, right? It's quite an intensive program, and basically what it does is you can apply to Intellect Boot Camp as a software developer. I think there is a UX one, there's a BA one. There's not a QA one just yet, but there is an option for you to move into the QA space once you've passed the boot camp. But for now, the major crafts are the software development, the business analyst, systems analyst, and the UX side of things. There is even a data analyst position as well if you want to specialize in that. Um, so yes, you guys can go ahead and apply for that. Ideally, we would look for somebody with not or no experience for that graduate to be eligible for that graduate program. So fresh students finishing their degrees. So in your final year studies, you should reach out to someone at Intellect if you know anybody at Intellect, or you can go straight to the culture.intellect.co.za site and apply directly through that website. I see another question here in terms of did I start off as a graduate? So no, I didn't start off as a graduate. I did do some internship as a website developer, kind of developing kind of WordPress and PrestaShop kind of websites for SMMEs. That was like kind of my internship. And then yeah, I was a tutor during my understudies. So then I moved into the lecturing space. And then from the lecturing space, I moved directly into an automation engineering role. So I did have some exposure and some expertise in the software development space. That was something I could have gone into. I wouldn't have been eligible with my experience to go into a graduate program because of the different internships and experience that I did have. Having said that, though, yeah, I started off as an automation engineer at a previous company, and then gained some exposure in the quality assurance space, doing a mix of automation and uh, functional testing. For that, in that previous company, the company that I worked for was specifically a quality assurance house. And to be employed in that quality assurance house, we needed to pass an ISTQB, which is the International Standards of Testing Quality Board. You basically need to have a foundation level test, which is basically the international standard of how to be a QA. Everybody at that company needed to be at least foundation certified, and they did encourage you to get more certifications after that. Those would be similar to a Microsoft AZ900 certification or a Microsoft Azure Fundamentals certification, if that rings any bells. Um, Yeah, having said that though, yeah, I would hang 10 on doing any of those certs until you're comfortably in industry. Because yeah, a lot of those would require some sort of um yeah, some sort of experience out there in the industry as well.
Just a few, sorry about that. Just a
No
few
worries.
things over here. With regards to like advice on the interview process and applying to, there's similar questions here. Any advice that you can give on how a student can prepare for that interview? Obviously, they can chat to people when they reach out, but also the student wants to know about whether they can apply for multiple jobs at once or whether the best way to get in is through the graduate program.
So you're allowed to, like, nothing's stopping you from applying for multiple roles. You do, however, need to identify what role is it that you're going for, right? So specifically from a recruitment side of things, we're looking for specific talent, right? So if you're going to go in as a developer, you need to understand what it is that needs you need to be a developer, right? In terms of interviews, and this is regardless of which company you'd go for, right? At the interview, you're going to be interviewed by people who have been doing this for a long time. So there's not going to be any expectation that you have all the answers to all the questions, right? In fact, they kind of approach it in a way to make sure that you don't have all the answers and to see what your level of knowledge is. You need to be able in those interviews to say, I don't know, but if I had to figure out, this is how I would go about figuring it out, right? Um, because of the way and because of how fast the tech world is growing when it comes to these kind of these kind of new solutions and new tech out there, the aim is to see how curious are you to explore, how curious are you when it comes to your craft, how dedicated are you, how passionate are you. That tends to hold a lot more weight than your technical knowledge. Your ability to solve problems, your ability to be taught, your ability to listen and understand a problem, not necessarily the craft. That can be taught and learned, over time. It's not something that needs to be done on day one. So, in terms of prepping for interviews, just kind of focus on problem solving, ask questions. I think that's also something that people are very intimidated to do. Ask questions. If things are not clear, say it's not clear. Don't assume anything. Sometimes the assumption is what gets you, right? So that's the important thing that you need to look out for in those interviews. And remember, it's not about necessarily like in high school when you're doing maths or in university when you're doing maths, right? Sometimes the answer doesn't need to be right. If you're on the right track of problem solving, you get part marks along the way. And sometimes you learn more from failure than you do from success. So yeah, just because the interview can go bad doesn't mean it's the worst thing in the world, right? It's about your curiosity and your learning and your passion. That tends to come through a lot more than you think. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you touched on that because that's something that our students should really focus on. That you don't have to now give off the impression that you already know everything. And as I really glad that you said that, you need to ask a lot of questions because people want to see how you think, not just that you want to have correct answers to things. So I think that's really useful advice. Also, what I noticed from your pathway and so many different pathways, which I think is really uh, maybe comforting for our students is that like at this point in your life you don't have to have every single thing figured out where you know exactly like I'm going to do this for the next 10 years and this is my exact career pathway. Most of us as you it's a journey that gets you to where you need to be, so be open to experiencing all these different things. And I think that's very like something that our students should keep in mind where they feel like everybody else has everything figured out and I don't, whereas we all like following a journey and it's getting us to our destination. So I think your journey as well is really inspiring in that like you're doing what you want to do and you did a lot of interesting things to get there along the way, which I'm sure you got a lot of from as well. But it got you to this destination. Just on that, maybe you can give your thoughts on that. But just a quick question somebody sent me privately is, can you just very quickly let us know about what is different between a BA and a QA?
What is the difference between P and a Q? Okay, cool. So This is actually a really, really good question because there's a lot of similarities between a BA and a QA, right? Within the BA and the QA space, there's a kind of a functional side of things and there's a technical side of things, right? So if I look at a BA side of things, there's actually a business analyst and a systems analyst, right? From a business analyst point of view, it's your job to liaise with the business and gather as many requirements and then transform those requirements into actual implementation steps that you can then say, okay, I want a banking system that I'm able to manage my entire transactions history, to make payments, to receive payments. I want to be able to manage e-bucks, and these are all high level features or high level goals that these companies would have, but each requirement has to be broken down, right? Because if you say transaction, for example, what does a transaction mean? A transaction mean, are you paying somebody? Is somebody paying you? Are you paying somebody else? Where is that money coming to? Is the payment scheduled? Is the payment once off? Is the payment recurring? What are the rules around these payments? Is there tax implications? What type of, is it going to a specific account? Is it going to a public recipient? All of these are just from transaction. So as a business analyst, you need to have a good context or learn the context of the system that you're trying to work with. A quality assurance engineer would come in and understand that process as well, but they're coming in from a different point of view. They're coming in to now interrogate those requirements, right? Wait, if you're saying transact, why are we transacting this way? What does this mean when you're saying if I'm transacting and it's a public recipient? What do you mean? What is required for that that's not required for a specific recipient, right? As a quality engineer, you're coming in and you're interrogating the requirement. You're actually testing the requirement itself. So it is similar, and you're working with the same set of data or the same implementation stuff, but your approach into how you're solving the problem is very different. You're coming in from a more interrogation point of view to make sure that whatever requirement is actually being implemented is of the best quality and adds the most value to the business. That from a high level is kind of that. From the system side of things or from the technical side of things, the same can be applied, right? So if you're creating a backend system that does X, Y, and Z, and you're providing a service to a bunch of different systems, you need to understand what it is what's the service you're providing, what's the value it brings, but then also understand how is this web service designed? How do these calls look like? The tech that you're trying to use, does it allow you to now send any data in? If you send malformed data or a bad JSON object, what happens? How does the system then handle it? From a QA, technical QA, and a technical BA side of it, or technical systems analyst side of it, you're then now in charge of identifying the requirements, building in those kind of quality into that whole system, and then transform those requirements and then go from a requirements phase into a development phase. And your job as a QA is very much involved. Not to say that someone in a developer role wouldn't be in that position to do the same thing, right? They're coming in as well with their point of view as a, okay, you're saying all of this, but then I know I'm working with like a really outdated stack where if I have to do this, I'll have to like really put in a lot of effort to get it done. So is it worth it? Does it add as much value to the client as it seems because the effort is so massive? That's why in the agile process we have sprint ceremonies or specifically backlog or grooming or refinement of these requirements so that everybody in the room, everybody of every craft goes in and interrogates those requirements and make sure it makes sense and adds a lot of value. And we're all coming in from different points of view. It's a long-winded answer, but I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it definitely gives us some insight into the differences. Just a few more things here. There's a question about, is there room for relocating to another office once you are employed? And at the same time, maybe you can touch on also, is there room for switching maybe between roles as well once you are in Intellect?
Yes, absolutely. So for now, the graduate program is specifically going to be so once you're in the boot camp or the graduate program, right? Everybody goes to Joburg. Everyone's in Joburg during that boot camp phase, right? Once you're past that boot camp phase, I think it's about 6 to 10 weeks. I can't remember exactly how long it was. They are constantly refining it. Sometimes it was a couple of months and then they brought it down to 6 weeks. Can't remember. It's very intensive. It's like 7 days a week from the beginning of January to like the end of like March or something. I can't remember exactly how long it is. Each year is different. Um, but yeah, that program is quite intense and everyone is co-located together in the Johannesburg office. Once you're done there, you either have a choice of staying in Johannesburg and kind of living there, or relocating to Cape Town and then being based as a graduate there. For now, there aren't any graduate positions in the Durban space. However, after some time, if you're like once you're kind of comfortable in your delivery, make sure because again, with Intellect as a graduate, the aim is also to give you as much support as you need. And there's a lot of people on the ground in the Joburg and the Cape Town offices to provide that support for you, as well as interact with clients. You need to understand how to interact with clients face to face before you interact with them via, a Teams or a Zoom. So that skills are very important to gain in person first. So we need to make sure that you're able and capable and learn and get that exposure in person before you have that opportunity to then move back to a Durban or somewhere else. In terms of relocating to other offices, yes, you do have that option. It might not always be feasible, but it can be done. There is an application progress program that you can go through and request that you can be relocated within the country to whichever office. So if I want to go to Cape Town, I just fill in a form and then, the company would help me move and it actually they actually wanting a lot of us Durban guys to move over to the Joburg Cape Town offices. But yes, that is an option. There are people that are relocating to Durban as well. You do also have the option to make a request to go internationally as well. So if you want to move to the Netherlands or Australia or the UK. There is that option as well. It's a little bit of a longer process. There's a little bit of red tape that you have to go through, like visas and customs and all of that stuff. So that does take a little bit of time, but the Intellect will help get the ball rolling in that manner as well. So that is an option for you.
There's two more questions here. A quick one on if a student has honors, do you advise all these students to apply directly for the graduate program, or should they look at other roles, or is the best place to start the graduate program?
So regardless of if you have your normal bachelor's or if you have your honors, I would still recommend going to the graduate program, right? It doesn't depend, it doesn't necessarily depend. Obviously, the honors is something that um we all should aim for and achieve to get that. I mean, obviously the certifications are like super, super helpful. But the bootcamp isn't based around what you would cover at honors or master's level, right? The bootcamp is to get you technically ready to become proper software developers as a consultant. It's a little bit of a different demon being a developer in-house for a company versus being a consultant, right? Because as a consultant, you're a developer, but you also have to be professional because you're dealing with clients. You're dealing with, the people are paying money for you for your service, right? So it's a little bit of a different demon. So that bootcamp is a little bit more intense and it's a little bit different to other companies because of the fact that you're a consultant or learning to be a consultant. Having said that, you're still like once if you're successful in the graduate program, you're still hired as an intellectual. You're hired permanently by Intellect. You're not a contract-based worker. You will have permanent employment. You're just a consultant for Intellect that will then be assigned to different clients. So you still have permanent employment, even though you're a consultant. You just get assigned to different clients.
So one more question has come in. So there is two more. So one, the student wants to
Sure.
know about what type of projects can they work on given that they have no job experience and they're particularly interested in QA. So how can they show intellect that they are like sort of setting the foundations to
Ooh, I don't know if it's me, but I think I got a little bit of
become a
that question.
QA and like what's the best way to get into set the foundation for something like
All right. Um, yeah, I think so I think the main thing is passion, right? You got to have passion and the skills can be taught. And I think coming in as a graduate, coming in into the boot camp, the main focus of that boot camp is to make you technically ready. It's to make sure that your skills are up to scratch. It's to make sure that you're able to deliver. Now, coming into projects, you're not gonna have experience, and that's almost an asset because you almost don't know how to do the thing wrong. So there is a lot of safety nets out there for you. You get placed with people who have been in the industry for a long time. There's a lot of people, intermediate, seniors, and tech leads that have a lot of experience. There are also some intermediates that have been through the same bootcamp process as you, so they know the PTSD that you go through during the bootcamp process. But having said that, yes, the expectation isn't that you're going to get it all right at the beginning, right? The aim is for you to learn and to get exposure and so you to craft your skills. But the things that we can't teach are passion, your willingness to go into the problem solving side of things, right? That's stuff that can't be taught. You guys need to just have that innately in you. In terms of switching over to a specific craft, if QA is really your passion, you do have the ability to switch over to any craft at any stage, right? The main thing is that if you're passionate about it, Intellect will support you in that journey, right? But it doesn't mean to say that you're stuck. Like if you want to be a developer and or if you're a BA and you're really passionate about being a developer, there's nothing stopping you from changing to be a developer. That option is always open for you. It will require a lot of effort on your part, but if you have the passion, then it should be relatively straightforward.
Okay, I think we will close with these. This one, just two. This one quick one came in about how many spaces are there in the boot camp? Is it very obviously you wouldn't know the exact numbers, but maybe you can just
Yeah,
tell us about the competitiveness or how challenge, like this
yeah.
how can students applying and ability to get in and things like that.
Yeah, so look, it varies from year to year. There were years that it was in the 70s to 80s. There was a year where we did 150, which was a really large number, and I think there was a lot of regret based on that number, because it was a huge number, and yeah, to provide that level of detail that we like to provide to all of the boot camps, to all of the graduates, it does get challenging when you have such a large number. But yes, it's very competitive. We have a lot of people from all the different campuses that are applying. So yeah, WITS, UP, UCT, Stellenbosch, all of these big universities are, we're actively recruiting there, and UKZN is definitely on the list. I don't think it's never been something that has we've turned away students from UKZN. I think that the struggle that a lot of students from UKZN faces that relocation to Joburg. That's always been the hesitancy. So it's so to say that, it's not a missed opportunity that you came to UKZN or anything like that. It's not going to be disadvantaged that you're here. It's just that when you apply, you're competing against all the universities, but you're also having to, potentially relocate to be part of this boot camp, which is a different challenge for somebody who's in the VITS or the UP or the UCT, for example.
Yeah, I think as you said, like, I personally and a lot of us, there are a lot of candidates that I know who've gone on from UKZN to work at Intellect, and a lot of people have stayed there and they're really happy at the company. So there is that relationship. Obviously, as you said, there many universities, it's a competitive process, but it is definitely, there is a bridge there between the UKZN and Intellect, which I encourage students to cross. Yeah, students are talking about what are the standards to get into the boot camp. I think you've touched on this in that talking about interviewing and talking about problem being showing that you can solve problems and need to show your passion across that. I think you can just maybe just to close off, you can just touch on there's a theme here that's been sent to me about the challenges of going into the workspace after university, and I know you've touched on how the boot camp prepares you for that. So maybe you can just touch on, in your experience and in intellectuals' experience about how challenging it is and how tips to make that transition a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think it is very yeah, it is a troubling a turbulent time because you're kind of adjusting your entire life, right? Your whole lifestyle is kind of changing, you know. We kind of groom you for 12 years to go to school and wake up and that, you know, before the dawn cracks and you know, you have to do X, Y, and Z and everything is very structured and then, you know, you go more to university where there is a little bit of structure there, but there's also a lot of freedom, right? And you know, obviously with freedom is responsibility and all of that stuff. So when you go into the working side of things, I think it also is a big adjustment. But again, I think the main thing is just to be passionate, to take everything like as it comes. There's nothing that can prepare you for those life journeys, right? And the one thing that, like I'll say, is like every moment that are big moments, there's bigger moments to come, right? You know, there was a lot of us that went into grade one and were like howling and crying, and it was such a miserable experience for us to go to grade one and leave our parents. But we look back and it's slightly different, right? It's kind of the same thing as moving into the career, into the kind of the industry where it's so scary and daunting, but you know, once you're in it, it does take some adjustment. It is a little bit scary and daunting, but the main thing is that you just need to keep an open mind and just absorb as much as you can about the world. It doesn't mean that, you know, you're a developer, you shouldn't understand how BAs work, or if you're a QA, you shouldn't understand how UX works, right? Absorb as much as you can, regardless of the role that you go into, regardless of what industry or company you go into. Absorb as much as you can. And you don't know the skills that you would gain just from being in that industry. There's a development manager that works here. His piece of advice was learn to love the boring stuff that nobody wants to do. So he learned and went through ISO standards. So ISO is the kind of international standards of everything. Everything has the ISO standards. So like he became really good at that. And nobody would think to do that, but eventually there was a requirement that came up and they needed someone that was ISO certified that understood all of these rules. And he put his hand up because he understood it. And then they realized, oh, wait, this guy is like one of the most valuable members of our team now because he understands this and he knows it. But it all stemmed from taking the time to do something boring. That doesn't mean that you have to do something boring. You can do something that's, you know, if you have a passion for it, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you can have a passion for cars or a
Is it just
passion
on my
for,
side or is Deashen cut off? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I think it was an issue on my side. You can carry on, Deashen.
oh, my bad. Yeah. So yeah, I think the key to success is taking what you're passionate about and combining it with what you're good at, right? Finding a balance there is important. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know, there are projects, the kind of projects that we work on vary. So we have a lot of big clients where we're working with different banking sectors, different financial sectors, insurance sectors. One of the projects that I was on was in the mining sector, and the system that we were working on integrated with a lab that grades diamonds. So how they took from rough diamonds, how they're kind of cut into different diamond shapes, and integrating with the lab that does the testing of these diamonds. So the system that we were testing was that integration with the lab system. So there was back-end test of how does this diamond data look. From that project, I had to kind of understand what does diamonds mean? What is the four C's of diamonds? And like it adds a lot of value because like when you get married, you got to know what a diamond is all about. So that's like, you know, it's something cool that you get to work with. There was another project at the previous company that I was working for. That's kind of where my journey started as an automation engineer. It was for a company called National Marrow Donor Program. Now, consultants don't really like to share client's name, but I really like to share this client's name because the National Maradona Program is an American program where it basically tries and match people who have certain type of blood disorders or leukemia or cancer if they have a specific blood type and they can't find donors in their family, they can go to this company and say, I have this blood type, and they will try and find a donor match for you from people who are registered on the system. And the people that register on the system are generally people that also have family members that have some sort of blood disorder or some sort of leukemia or something like that. So there was an entire backend system that managed the mapping of these DNA and this actual blood types to each other on a scale of 1 to 6. And the system was called HapLogic, where it actually tried and find matches between different candidates. And as an automation engineer, I just had a tech background. I don't know anything about anything, but it's such a rewarding thing to be part of that system and to work on that system as an automation engineer, where it was like my skills as an automation engineer was working to make sure that people got the right matches and to make sure that people actually found some sort of connection between different patients. So in terms of projects, there's a variety of projects out there, and each one has its own set of challenges, right? In the financial industry, a lot of the things is, just how do we make it easier for the customer to get our product? So a lot of the time is just kind of making it online, making it as efficient and streamlining it as much as possible. The easier it is for you to do something, the more work it took for someone to actually get it done, right? That's also kind of like things like UX, user experience. It's not just screen design. It's how do you as a user interact with the system? Sometimes it's not always easy to open a website on your phone. What do you do in that situation? So yeah, at Intellect, we have a lot of kind of corporate style products, but we do have some nuanced products like, mining sector, insurance sector. I think there's some entertainment stuff somewhere along the way as well. So yeah, we have a bunch of different ones out there. And the nice thing about being a consultant is that you get rotated between the different projects. So you have 2 years of experience at something like Discovery, and after 2 years, you kind of get rotated to F&B. So in 4 years, you would have had 2 years experience at Discovery and 2 years experience at F&B, but you have 4 years of exposure in a financial industry as well as a banking industry. So you're much more of a well-rounded developer, well-rounded kind of consultant because you've been exposed to all of these different companies. So even though people kind of like to go to a specific company, as a consultant, you get to join a specific company, but you get to get exposed to all the different corporates around us. And at Intellect, we have a lot of them as well. So yeah,
Thanks. Yeah, it's nice to hear about, actual use cases that you've worked on. And I think that's like
yeah,
the beauty of working as a consultant is you get to have an impact in many different fields. You're not working on the same project all the time. So that's a
yeah.
quite a nice space to be in. I think there aren't any more questions. So we'd like to once again thank you, Deashen, for making the time to present to our students. I'm sure there's a lot of a lot that they want to read up more on about opportunities at Intellect. And the nice thing about the Intellect website is that it's very clear on all these things. So we appreciate your time, and we hope that our students maybe will see some of our students will meet you in person at some point when they join Intellect. Um, and just for our students, our tech talks will continue every week. And next week we have Discovery, who are going to be presenting a talk. And that will conclude our tech talk for this week. Thanks everyone for attending. And I hope to see all of you back next week.
Yeah, thank you for your time and have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, Yashin.